some of them are being tested for the first time. And some of the reports from the battlefield suggest that not all the munitions have functioned perfectly.
Korea to meet Kim Jong-un. Now, since the war in Ukraine, President Putin and Russia have been shunned by the international community, really, and slapped with all sorts of debilitating sanctions. 2 years on, Russia really needs weapons, and North Korea is one of the few countries that will sell to them. Now, for his part, Kim Jong-un is rolling out the red carpet. Pictures have come out of Pyongyang. Roads apparently are lined with Putin's face, and the Russian flags are flying. Jim Townsend is a former Deputy Secretary of Defence for Europe and NATO under Presidents Obama and Biden. Mr. Townsend, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you.
Well, it seems pretty clear Russia needs North Korea's weapons. What do North Korea get out of this cooperation with Vladimir Putin and Russia?
Well, North Korea is a pretty isolated place these days, as you know, under sanctions, seen as a pariah. And then having suddenly, over the past couple of years, the Russians pay attention to them, Putin going to North Korea. Uh, in the first instance, this is a feeling of respectability that I'm sure the North Koreans are beginning to feel. Although getting respectability by a visit from Putin, you have to question. But there are other things too. I think particularly one of them is help on military modernization for the North Korean forces that the Russians can provide, including space.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm puzzled by how it is that North Korea have weaponry and ammunition to supply to Russia. Just how good is their technology?
Well, their technology for the basics, like artillery ammunition and that type of thing, is it's kind of moderate. It's what every nation has the ability to do is to make artillery ammunition and that type of thing. The thing about North Korea is that they've got a lot of it because they have forces primed to take over South Korea, and artillery will play a big role. So they have large storehouses of the type of ammunition that the Russians also use. Where they're not very good is in space. They've been trying to launch satellites and they keep blowing up. And so they haven't been able to put up satellites and other ballistic missile types of capability that they want Russian help on.
Presumably, this visit will be incredibly staged managed. There's no way that Vladimir Putin will have any sight of what we still believe to be the appalling suffering of the North Korean people.
That's exactly correct. Everything in North Korea is stage managed, as you've seen in countless photographs and videos of these marching troops. It's quite a choreographed country, and Putin will see all of that, and that will certainly stroke his ego as well. The appalling conditions, hunger and this type of thing, will be kept well out of sight. He will be fed well, he will sleep well, he will see his photo all over the place, and his ego will swell as he returns back to Moscow.
Is he really that much of a thin-skinned narcissist then?
I think so. I'm not an expert on Putin, but certainly his behavior in the past has shown that he is. He's not as bad as Donald Trump, but I think he is. But I think he is certainly has his own mental qualities where his ego being stroked is a good thing for him.
Yeah, I mean, this is a grim old axis forming here, isn't it? North Korea and Russia. And obviously, we're in the midst of our general election campaign in this country with actually very little talk of defence or defence spending. Does it concern you, from your perspective, Jim, that the West of Europe appears somewhat uninterested?
Well, it's a very interesting point, and I have certainly noticed that coming out of the UK. I've spent many, many years working with Europe and in the defense area when I was at the Pentagon, and I would have expected UK to be in the forefront in terms of getting itself, as well as its NATO allied partners and other Europeans too, ready to go just in case we're going to have to deal with a very aggressive Russia. And your point about this axis, it's not just between Russia and North Korea, it's China, it's Iran. So we've got a lot on our plate, and UK has always been the leader and certainly a partner with us. And I don't want to say that UK doesn't lead, but I think the UK certainly is distracted, as you pointed out, the election season upon us. We are too, by the way, with our elections as well. And I think whether it's in the US or UK, we are not as aware, maybe, of what the future could hold for us as they are on continental Europe.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
I mean, you've already illustrated in this conversation you're no fan of former President Trump. Let's say he does get re-elected. What then?
Well, that's the big question. And in Europe right now, on the continent certainly, there's attempts to try to Trump-proof NATO, try to get as many things that the U.S. has been doing by itself, like organizing assistance to Ukraine, getting that put inside of NATO. So no matter what happens with a potential Trump election, that won't go away. That'll be part of NATO. But there's a lot of concern on the continent, and that has led to a push to say, no matter what the situation was politically in the past, right now there's a sense of crisis, and the European nations are really scrambling to try to improve their military capability in case the US disengages somewhat. Certainly, it will disengage from helping Ukraine if Trump were elected, or if there was a contingency in the Indo Pacific where the US has to send forces that are right now in Europe and has to send them to the Pacific. There'll be gaps that have to be filled, and the European nations, including UK, will have to fill those gaps. And so there's quite a scramble right now on the continent. And I think my colleagues in London are certainly aware of it, but I think the politics, and you know better than I, but I think the politics in the UK are distracted and looking in other directions and not necessarily at a more aggressive Russia.
North Korea. What do these two leaders want from each other?
Well, I think for Putin, it's very much to do with the war in Ukraine, and he has appreciated North Korea's support for Russia's positions from the start of the invasion in 2022. But in particular, although Russia and North Korea deny it, he benefits from weapons supply, artillery, and missiles from North Korea.
Yes.
For North Korea, for Kim Jong-un, I think he's seen a strategic advantage ever since the invasion of Ukraine, and there are all sorts of ways in a transactional way that he can benefit, but it fundamentally strengthens his position against the United States as he sees it.
Right. I mean, North Korea, Alistair, have been stacking up weapons, haven't they, for many years now. But what about the quality and the quantity of those munitions when it comes to helping to supply Russia?
Well, I think some of them are being tested for the first time, and some of the reports from the battlefield suggest that not all the munitions have functioned perfectly. But not only does North Korea have a large stockpile of weapons which are compatible with Russian systems, but I think it's very likely that they are manufacturing new weapons that they can supply. In terms of the North Korea's own launches that you see for its ballistic missiles, it's had its failures, but it's had a long run of successful launches. So I wouldn't completely discount the capability of their munitions.
Yeah. Would it? I mean, do you assess? Do you believe the supply of munitions from North Korea to Russia will make a significant difference, or much difference at all, on the battlefield in Ukraine?
Well, initially the US position, and I'm not on the battlefield, and I only have second-hand evidence here, but initially the US position was that it wouldn't make a difference. But now that we're seeing evidence of very, very large-scale shipments of munitions, 11,000 containers is one estimate, that can make a difference. And that I think is now the United States position.
Yeah, I mean, Russia hasn't it, in comparatively recent time, re-geared its economy to the manufacture of weapons and ammunition. It's devoted an enormously larger portion of its national earnings to defense and security. I say defense and security. In the case of Ukraine, we're talking about attack.
Yeah, and of course, that's absolutely right. And Russia's own munitions capability is very great. But it's also looking elsewhere, and we've seen that particularly with the use of Iranian drones, for instance.
Now, what about North Korea? What does Kim Jong-un want to get from Russia? I mean, this visit has been discussed in terms of aid from the Russian side, munitions from the North Korean side. But tell us a bit more about what North Korea, the country you know so well, what do they hope to gain from this?
Well, it's taken quite a long time for this visit to come about. When Kim met Putin in 2019, he invited him, and then invited him again when he saw him in 2023. So it's 5 years, if you like, since it's materialized. In strategic terms, I think that Kim Jong-un sees Russian support as ensuring that he will not face in the United Nations or elsewhere effective sanctions against his nuclear program. And he'll also enjoy Russian support on issues like human rights as well. In terms of the benefits, he probably wishes to increase economic relations and diversify from China, on which North Korea has become extremely dependent. But he will be looking for all he can get, and I don't know how much he will get, in terms of technology transfers, incoming tourism, which will be a source of income, and exchanges in a range of areas which may provide money for his coffers.
And what about just basic subsistence supplies? I mean, are the people of North Korea well enough fed? I mean, we're all familiar with the famous satellite pictures. You look down at North Korea from a satellite and you see darkness across North Korea. You see bright lights in South Korea. We know the economy there and the agricultural economy is so much more backward. Are people of North Korea in need of basic supplies, food?
There is a humanitarian need, and the United Nations has attempted to quantify that. When I was there, which was up until 2018, there was no obvious starvation. People had a frugal diet with inadequate protein, and there was still some stunting of children and so on. But actually, the country was fed. Since then, with the COVID lockdown that North Korea imposed on itself, and the blocking off by themselves of all external trade for a period, it's very likely that conditions deteriorated and that levels of subsistence went down, and there may have been localized loss of life. I'm not there, I can't see it, but that's very likely. So yes, they do need more food. It's a mountainous country. It's difficult for North Korea to grow enough food for its people of a diverse kind. So it's reliant on external trade. And when it stops the external trade, there isn't enough food.
Really, really interesting to get your analysis, Alistair. Thank you, Alistair Morgan, the former British ambassador to North Korea.